So welcome to the show, Mr. Kugelman. My question to you is, what do you understand is the situation right now as far as the counting is concerned, and how do you see the future is coming?
Well, I think the best way to describe the situation is very close, much closer than many expected. Much like in the 2016 election, there was a sense that Trump was not going to do very well. The polling was showing him with significant deficits in a number of key states, and yet we see right now, as of now, that it's very close, and it's going to come down to a few states. And as you know, elections in the U.S. are decided by electoral college votes, not by the popular vote. So you can win the popular vote, but still not win the election. And, that could happen in this case as well. But there are a few key states in play, like Pennsylvania, for instance, Wisconsin. They're all very close. And I think it could be a day or so at least before we have a better sense of what's going to go on. There are a lot of mail-in votes that still have to be counted, particularly in urban areas, Atlanta, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. And I think that for the Democrats, the hope is that those votes have time to be counted, because those urban areas tend to be areas where Democrats tend to do very well. So we're a long way from this being over at this point.
Right. So, Michael, can you please expand your conversation more on the people who are in U.S. Like they've chosen Trump at that time, and there was an understanding that Hillary Clinton is going to win 2016 election, right? And it didn't happen. She got the lead from public, but the Electoral College, they decided on Trump. So do you think this is something which is going to happen again, or this is not the case this time?
Well, I mean, Biden has more paths to victory than Hillary Clinton did in 2016, and that's we see by how close things are. I mean, for instance, Biden could lose Pennsylvania, which is a huge electoral college prize with 20 electoral votes. He could lose Pennsylvania and still win the election if he takes a few other states. So he has a few options. He certainly has a greater chance than Clinton did in 2016. But look, I think it's important to remember that we look at the polls and we think that, okay, that must mean that that Biden is in a good position to win, just as Clinton was. But this is a country where Donald Trump is someone who is very well known, has been very prominent for a long time. He has always had large bases of frenetic, fervent supporters, and that includes up to now. Even though we've had this pandemic that's just convulsed the country, and he has been severely criticized for his handling of it, but he retains a very large popular base. And just on anecdotal levels, it doesn't take long anywhere in the U.S. to go somewhere and see Trump campaign signs. Certainly the urban areas tend to be more liberal and more pro-Democrat, but it doesn't take long to go anywhere in this country and find fervent supporters of Trump. So, as I had said before, given the fact that you have large numbers of mail-in ballots that haven't yet been counted, most of those, as I understand it, are in cities where Democrats tend to do well. So that suggests that Biden, so long as those votes can be counted, Biden still has a pretty good chance of winning the election. But it's going to really be close. It's going to come down to the wire. And I think what's quite clear is that while there was a lot of pre-election day voting, record numbers of turnout before the election, much of that being people supporting Biden, what we had yesterday on Election Day was massive turnout of people supporting Trump. So the Republicans did get their supporters out there to vote on Election Day, which bodes well for them.
Right. And also this year is one of those years where, one of those terms as well, where the highest number of voters came, around 65% was the turnout that I read somewhere. But anyways, continuing more on the diplomatic front, whoever comes and holds the Oval Office, help us understand, sitting here in Pakistan and looking things from Pakistan's side, we normally foreign office normally look at what kind of relations we're going to have with the person who's going to sit in the Oval Office, and how it will impact the local public, the civilians living here, their lives, right? So help me understand, and I want you to expand in detail that how and what kind of relation Pakistan is going to have with either of any administration, and what kind of impact it may have on people living here in Pakistan.
So as you know, both Trump, when he's been president, as well as Biden, when he was vice president, experienced good and bad times with Pakistan, right? I mean, the Obama administration, there was a lot of hope for the U.S.-Pakistan relationship during its early years when you had the strategic dialogue formed and all that. But then you just had a few terrible years, 2011, 2012, the relationship with Pakistan went downhill. Then with Trump, early in his term, things were not good at all when he, of course, authorized suspension of aid, and his tweets on New Year's Day in which he called Pakistan a country of liars and people that are deceitful. But then when Trump decided that he wanted to pursue a peace deal with in Afghanistan and talk to the Taliban, all of a sudden the relationship with Pakistan got a lot better. So both of these men know that it's a difficult, to say the least, a very complicated, difficult relationship with Pakistan. I really think that these two men think relatively similarly when it comes to Pakistan. They both view Pakistan as an important country. That's clear. And they both view it as a country that warrants a workable, at the least, relationship with the United States. But I do think that they both see the relationship with Pakistan as one that's centered around two key priorities. One is to cooperate with Pakistan and hope that Pakistan can help with this very fledgling but fragile peace process in Afghanistan. And two, the U.S. wants to, on the one hand, cooperate with Pakistan on counterterrorism issues, such as looking at shared threats like al-Qaeda and Islamic State. But also the U.S., that Biden or Trump would want Pakistan to continue with these efforts to weed out terrorist financing and other aspects of counterterrorism called for by the FATF and other international groups. I think that both Biden and Trump would be inclined to look at the idea of broadening the relationship beyond security into more trade and investment, but only after those other goals are addressed first, like having Pakistan help in Afghanistan and having Pakistan deal with the counterterrorism issues. Now, it's true that, as I understand it, when Biden's former boss, Obama, was not popular in Pakistan because of the drone war and other things. So you could argue that perhaps Trump would be more well received there if he's reelected, just because the U.S.-Pakistan relationship under his watch has been doing pretty well. But I think that the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is going to be reaching an inflection point, regardless of who wins the election, just because amid an inevitable withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, the U.S.-Pakistan relationship will need a new basis that's separate from Afghanistan, because for so long in Washington, the U.S.-Pakistan relationship has been viewed through the lens of Afghanistan. So I think that both, either Biden or Trump, would really need to do a rethink about what the U.S.-Pakistan relationship should look like in the coming months and years.
Right. So if we expand this conversation more on the relations with India, because U.S. is having good relations with India, specifically from these past 10 years almost. Do you think this is going to impact the relation of U.S. with India with the change of command, the person sitting in the Oval Office? Because right now we see lots of agreements, we see the visits, we see lots of friendship on both sides. If Joe is there, will there be any difference, or does it make any difference, and how this will impact Pakistan overall, this region?
Yeah, I would see a lot of continuity in U.S. policy toward India if Biden were to come to power. A lot of continuity with the Trump administration. There's long been a bipartisan consensus in Washington that a strong security partnership with India is essential, and in fact a strategic imperative. And there are various reasons for that, but the main one is that over the last 10, 15 years, the U.S.-India relationship has grown exponentially, fueled by two factors that enjoy bipartisan support. One is counterterrorism, and the other is concern about China. So in other words, as Washington sees it, it's important to pursue a deep partnership with India in order to work together to combat terrorism in the region, and especially to deal with what is perceived by both capitals as the increasingly problematic and threatening activities of China in the region. And that's a key factor here, that China is the key U.S. foreign policy consideration for the U.S., and that's the case regardless of whether Trump is back or Biden takes office. So U.S. foreign policy, particularly in South Asia, India, but the region broadly speaking, will be seen through the China lens. And that suggests to me that you're going to see continuity. Both Biden, and Trump view China as a strategic competitor and perhaps even as a strategic threat. And in that regard, India will continue to be looked at a country that needs to be a key partner. Now, one notable difference that I know has been discussed in Pakistan is that if there were to be President Biden, he would be more willing to call out India for its human rights problems in Kashmir and more broadly as well. And we've seen that Barack Obama, very famously when he was president, he made a speech in New Delhi in which he was very critical of India's religious freedom situation. So a Democratic president, I think, would be more willing to call out India. But that said, I think that if there were a Biden administration in power, that even if there would be more criticism of India for its rights issues, that criticism would be relatively muted, just because the main objective for a U.S. administration, regardless of whether it's Biden or Trump, would be for there to be this focus on strategic partnership. So there would be a desire not to rock the boat with India too much in order to avoid antagonizing India. Very briefly, what this means for Pakistan, well, I think that certainly there are limits to U.S.-Pakistan partnership by virtue of the reality of a deepening U.S.-India security partnership. And certainly the fact that just a few days ago the U.S. and India signed a major defense accord that allows India to gain a pretty significant strategic advantage in South Asia, because it will now have access to very sensitive, detailed intelligence from the U.S., which could better enable India to track movements, locations of enemies, whether those are terrorists or Chinese or Pakistani soldiers or whatever the case may be. So I do think that there are limits to U.S.-Pakistan relations by virtue of the strength of the U.S.-India relationship, but as well as the Pakistan-China relationship. I think that's another break on, that's another indication of the limits of U.S.-Pakistan partnership.
Right. So you're of the view, basically, you're saying that whoever comes and sit in the Oval Office is not going to change their principal policy on China, right?
Correct. I mean, I do think that a Biden administration would try to take a modestly more conciliatory position toward China. I mean, there has been messaging from the Biden campaign, including Biden himself, that he would want to look for areas of cooperation with China where they exist. And he specifically has mentioned climate change, health security, even non-proliferation, which is interesting. So I do think that if you want to look for differences between the two men, I think that Trump is more likely to look at China as a broader threat, as a strategic competitor, as an economic threat, as a national security threat, whereas Biden, I think, would view Beijing, in terms of threat perception, he would look at China as a threat to U.S. economic primacy, but he wouldn't want to cloak it in this broader threat rubric that Trump would want to look at it as. So bottom line is that I think there would be more room for cooperation with China in a Biden administration, and certainly if the if the toxic U.S.-China relationship were to improve even just a bit, I think that would be very good for U.S.-Pakistan relations.
Right. Okay. Last question to you, Michael. There's an understanding here in Pakistan, or I think in most of the developed countries, that whoever comes and sits in the Oval Office doesn't make any difference because the principal policy remains the same from the U.S. side. Is this the right theory, or is there some difference? Or let me just put this in another way, because the principal policy remains the same, and there's bit policy shift, bit policy change as the administration change, as the policy maker is changing. What is the story? How it happens, or it doesn't happen?
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to foreign policy on the whole, it's a very polarized sphere that Trump and Biden don't really agree on much when it comes to foreign policy, and particularly in a very broad level, that Trump took a very unconventional view toward U.S. foreign policy in which he decided that it was important for U.S. interests to withdraw from important long-standing international institutions, whether you're talking about the Global Climate Accord or other institutions. And Trump, of course, is also not interested in having the U.S. be the global leader that other presidents, including a potential President Biden, would want to see. So there are differences in that regard. As we discussed, I do think there's similar policies on South Asia. But I mean, there are a few notable differences between Trump and Biden on foreign policy writ large that certainly would have an impact on Pakistan and the region. Just to highlight one, Iran. I think that if you can predict one thing safely about a Biden administration, is that they would try to have a better relationship with Iran. There would be an effort to bring the U.S. back into the nuclear deal with Iran, which Trump, of course, backed out of. And if the U.S. and Iran were to have even a modest détente in their relationship, that would be huge, because no one in South Asia, whether Pakistan or India or anyone else, no one benefits from a U.S.-Iran rivalry that's at risk of spiraling out of control. So I think that is an area where you could see some clear benefits of a Biden administration for Pakistan and the broader region.
Right. Thank you so much. We had Mr. Michael Kugelman with us, based in U.S., senior journalist and analyst. Thank you for your time, sir.